I am Walter, 68 years old, and until last Thursday, I believed loyalty still meant something in my family. I was pressing my good gray suit for my granddaughter's graduation when my phone lit up on the dresser. It was a text from my son-in-law, Craig. Change of plans. You're not coming to the ceremony. Denise says it's immediate family only. I sat down on the edge of the bed, reading those 11 words until the letter stopped making sense. I did not text back. I simply hung the suit back in the closet, closed the door, and drove to the bank the next morning before it opened. Before I go any further, let me ask, where are you watching from tonight? Son, daughter, or maybe you're a grandparent like me? Drop it in the comments. And if you've ever been the one who paid for everything and got thanked with a locked door, hit that like button before we continue. The kitchen light had still been off when I woke up that Thursday morning. I remember that detail clearly because I'd set my alarm for 5:30 specifically so I wouldn't be rushed. Madison's graduation from Baylor was supposed to start at 11, and I wanted to look sharp for her. I had pressed that suit 3 times because the collar kept curling in the wrong direction. I'd polished my shoes the night before, the same pair I wore to her mother's wedding 26 years ago. I'd even ordered a bouquet of white roses from the florist on Kessler Avenue, the same one my late wife Carol used to visit every spring before the cancer took her. I was humming something I couldn't even name, running my thumb along the crease of my slacks, when my phone buzzed against the dresser with a sound that felt, in hindsight, almost mocking in its casualness. I expected it to be Denise, my daughter, telling me what time to be at the venue, or maybe Madison herself, sending one of her silly graduation cap selfies. Instead, it was Craig. 9 years married to my daughter, and in 9 years, this was maybe the 4th time he had ever texted me directly. Change of plans. You're not coming to the ceremony. Denise says it's immediate family only. I read it once and told myself I'd misunderstood the phrasing, that autocorrect had scrambled something and turned an invitation into an insult. I read it a second time, slower, mouthing each word. I took off my glasses, cleaned them on my undershirt out of pure nervous habit, and put them back on to read it a third time. The words held their shape. There was no follow-up text softening the blow, no laughing emoji suggesting this was some kind of joke gone wrong. Just 7 words of dismissal delivered by my son-in-law on a Thursday morning, 4 hours before I was supposed to watch my only grandchild cross a stage in a cap and gown that I had, quietly and without either of them ever knowing, paid for in full tuition, dorm fees, meal plan, the whole 4 years of it. I looked around my apartment. Modest, 1 bedroom, on the 2nd floor of a building off Preston Road, the kind of place that made people assume things about a man's finances. I had lived here for 6 years, ever since Carol passed, and the big house on Chandler Lane felt too much like a museum of grief for me to stay in it alone. Denise had cried with relief when I told her I was downsizing. "That's smart, Dad," she'd said. "You don't need all that space." What she meant, though she never said it out loud, was that she assumed her father, a retired high school shop teacher, simply couldn't afford to keep the house running. That assumption had followed me for 6 years. Denise brought me groceries some Sundays like I was a charity case. Craig made jokes at holiday dinners about my teacher's pension, always with that little smirk, always followed by a laugh he expected me to join. They had no idea. Carol and I had never lived like people with money because we never wanted our daughter chasing a version of us that wasn't real. But back in 1987, when I was still grading essays and coaching the wrestling team, Carol's Uncle Pete had died without children and left us 40 acres of undeveloped land off the interstate corridor near Frisco, back when Frisco was nothing but cattle pasture and dust. We held on to it because Carol said land always outlasts foolishness. Neither of us touched it, not even to build. We let it sit for 37 years while shop teacher salaries paid the mortgage and grocery bills and swim lessons. And then 2 years ago, 3 separate developers came sniffing around that same dusty pasture with checkbooks that made my hands shake the first time I saw the number. I sold to the highest bidder. After taxes, after the lawyers, after everything, I had more money sitting in a brokerage account than Craig would clear in 15 years at his sales job, and not one soul in my family knew it existed. I had kept that a secret out of the same instinct that made Carol keep the land quiet for 3 decades. We didn't want to be loved for a number in a bank account. I wanted Denise to visit me because she wanted to, not because she was angling for something. I paid for Madison's college secretly, funneling it through a scholarship fund I invented and named after Carol so nobody would trace it back to me. I wanted my granddaughter to feel like she'd earned it on her own merit, Not like she was living off Grandpa's money. That secret had felt, for 2 years, like an act of love. Standing in my bedroom with that text still glowing on my screen, it started to feel like something else entirely. It started to feel like I had spent 2 years quietly funding my own erasure. I sat with the silence of the apartment pressing in around me. I did not call Craig to demand an explanation. I did not call Denise, screaming, the way some other man might have. I walked to my closet, unzipped the garment bag holding my pressed suit, and hung it carefully back on the rod. I picked up the white roses from where they sat on the kitchen counter in their little glass vase, and I set them gently in the trash can, stems first, so the water wouldn't spill. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee going cold in front of me, and I let something inside me go very, very quiet. For a long time, I had operated on a single guiding belief that being a good father, and later a good grandfather, meant being the invisible foundation nobody sees but everybody stands on. I paid the electric bill the year Denise and Craig almost lost their house during the recession, and I never mentioned it again after the check cleared. I co-signed Craig's business loan for the flooring company he tried to start in 2019, the one that folded 18 months later, and I quietly absorbed the $12,000 the bank came after me for so it would never touch Denise's credit. I drove 3 hours each way, every single week for 2 years, to pick Madison up from her mother's house and drop her at swim practice, because Denise and Craig's schedules never seemed to align. I had built myself into scaffolding. And scaffolding, I was learning at 68 years old, sitting at my own kitchen table, is invisible right up until the moment someone decides they don't need it anymore. I picked up my phone again, not to text Craig, but to open my banking app. I scrolled to the automatic transfer I had set up 18 months earlier, $600 a month, quietly wired into an account Denise thought was extra help from her retirement fund. Money that in reality covered nearly a third of her and Craig's mortgage payment every single month, an arrangement Craig didn't even know existed, because Denise had asked me, "Please, Dad, don't tell him. He gets prideful about money." I looked at that recurring transfer for a long moment. Then with one press of my thumb, I canceled it. I scrolled further. There was the gift I sent every December to cover Madison's private tutoring, the one that kept her grades high enough for the scholarships she now believed she'd earned entirely on her own hard work canceled. There was the auto payment on the storage unit where Craig kept his failed flooring business's leftover equipment he still hoped to sell someday, sitting in a unit I paid for, so he wouldn't have to admit the business was truly, completely dead canceled. Each cancellation confirmation popped up on my screen with a small green check, so simple and so quiet, and yet each one felt like pulling a support beam out from beneath a house that had never once thanked me for building it. I was not finished. I picked up my phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in almost a year, my attorney. A sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rosalind Farrow, who had handled Carol's estate and, more recently, the sale of the land. She answered on the second ring. "Walter," she said, "everything all right? I need you to pull up the scholarship fund," I told her. "The one in Carol's name. I want it frozen, effective today." There was a pause on the line, the sound of a keyboard clicking somewhere in her office in downtown Dallas. "You're sure? That covers the remainder of Madison's tuition for the fall semester." "I'm sure," I said. "And Rosalind, I also want you to draft something for me. A letter of intent, formal, notarized. I'm restructuring my estate plan, effective immediately." We talked for 20 minutes. By the time I hung up, the sun outside my apartment window had climbed high enough to bleach the sky white, and somewhere across town, my daughter and son-in-law were likely already seated in the third row of a packed auditorium at Baylor, waiting for their daughter's name to be called, utterly unaware that the man who had quietly financed nearly every corner of their comfortable life had just spent his morning dismantling it, calmly, methodically, one green check mark at a time. At 11:15 that morning, according to the group text Denise sent later that I only saw because Madison, God bless her, still had me in the family chain. I was not there to read it live, but I pieced it together afterward. Madison walked across that stage and accepted her diploma to applause from a crowd that did not include her grandfather. I found out later, from Madison herself, that she had scanned the auditorium 3 separate times looking for me before she went up, and that when she didn't find my face, she had nearly stopped smiling for the photograph. That detail, when she told me, hurt worse than anything Craig's text had said. But that afternoon, I had no way of knowing that yet. That afternoon, I drove out to the old plot of land in Frisco, the one that had funded my entire secret life, now half transformed into a shopping development with a Chick-fil-A already open and a Target under construction. I parked my truck at the edge of the lot and sat there for a long while, watching construction workers move steel beams into place, thinking about how strange it was that the ground beneath me had quietly become worth more than my entire relationship with my own daughter. My phone rang at 4 o'clock. It was Denise. "Dad, where were you?" Her voice had that particular pitch she used when she was more embarrassed than concerned. Madison kept asking. I told her you probably got the time wrong. I sat in my truck with the engine off and the windows cracked, watching a crane lift a beam 30 feet into the Texas sky. "Craig texted me this morning," I said. "Said it was immediate family only. Said you didn't want me there." The silence on the other end of the line lasted 4 full seconds. I counted them. "Craig said what?" "Immediate family only, Denise." His words. "I still have the text if you'd like me to read it to you." "Dad, I never said that. I don't even know why he would." She stopped herself. I could hear her breathing shift, could practically hear the exact moment her mind connected some dots she hadn't wanted connected. "Dad, was this about the seating? We only had 6 guest passes for the ceremony, and Craig's parents wanted to come, and his sister, and I told him we needed to figure out who. So instead of asking me," I said, my voice level, calm, the same voice I used to use breaking up locker room fights 30 years ago. "He told me I wasn't family. He wouldn't have meant it like that." He typed the words Denise. There's no version of typing those specific words that doesn't mean exactly what it says. She was quiet again. In the background, I could hear the sounds of a hotel room, ice clinking in a bucket, Craig's voice asking something I couldn't make out, muffled the way voices get when a hand is pressed over a phone speaker. "I have to go," Denise said finally. "We'll talk about this when we're back Sunday." "We will," I agreed, and I meant it in a way she did not yet understand. I did not go into detail with her about the accounts. I did not mention Rosalind, or the frozen scholarship fund, or the fact that in 6 days, when Madison's fall tuition invoice came due, there would be no scholarship covering it, and the university would send a bill directly to Denise and Craig's home address for an amount neither of them had budgeted for, because neither of them had ever known it existed. I did not tell her about the storage unit, or the mortgage transfer, or any of it. I let her drive back from Waco that Sunday, not knowing that the ground beneath her comfortable life had already shifted. The days between the graduation and their return home stretched out slow and strange for me, the way time does after a decision that changes everything but hasn't yet been discovered. I spent that Friday with Rosalind in her office, going over the language of the new trust in careful, patient detail. I removed Craig entirely from any position of financial proximity to my estate. He had never been named directly, but he'd been positioned, informally, as the executor Denise intended to lean on someday, given his background in finance-adjacent sales work, and I made sure that possibility closed permanently, replaced instead with a trust attorney and a clean, ironclad structure that no son-in-law could ever touch. I restructured the remainder of my estate into an irrevocable trust for Madison alone, to be released to her in staged increments starting at 25, with language specifically excluding any spousal claim, present or future, a clause Rosalind said she rarely saw requested with such specificity. "You really thought this through," she said, sliding the paperwork across her desk for my signature. "I've had 6 years to think about very little else," I told her, and signed my name. On Saturday, I drove to the storage facility on Coit Road and stood in front of Unit 214, the one holding the remains of Craig's flooring business, 3 pallets of unused laminate, a table saw still wrapped in its original plastic, boxes of business cards for a company called Faro Flooring Solutions that had lasted exactly 18 months before folding under the weight of Craig's inexperience, and, I'd always suspected, a fair amount of his pride refusing to ask for real advice before it was too late. I called the facility manager and instructed them that as of the first of the following month, the unit would default to auction status unless someone stepped forward to claim ownership and begin paying the rent themselves. I did not call Craig to tell him. I simply let the calendar do the talking. By Sunday evening, when Denise, Craig, and Madison pulled back into their driveway on Wexford Court after the 3-hour drive from Waco, the first thing waiting for them was not a welcome home banner or a stack of mail. It was a certified letter from Baylor University's bursar's office, informing them that the Carol Whitfield Memorial Scholarship, which had been covering 70% of Madison's tuition for the past 2 years, had been discontinued effective immediately and that a balance of $11,400 was now due for the current semester within 30 days. Madison told me later that her mother read that letter standing in the driveway, suitcase still in hand, and went completely white. Craig thought it was a clerical error, Madison said. When she called me 2 days later, her voice tight with a confusion that was slowly curdling into anger, though not, as I would soon discover, anger at me. Mom called the school. They told her the fund was privately endowed. Anonymous donor. They said the donor had exercised their right to discontinue funding at will per the original agreement. Is that right? I said, keeping my voice as neutral as I could manage. Grandpa. Madison's voice cracked slightly on the word, the way it used to when she was 7 years old and scared of thunderstorms. It was you, wasn't it? The scholarship. It was always you. I did not answer right away. Outside my apartment window, the late afternoon light was turning the parking lot a soft amber color, and I thought about all the ways I could soften this, all the ways I could still protect the fiction I had built for 2 years. The fiction where Madison believed she had done this entirely on her own. It was me, I said finally. Your grandmother's name, your grandmother's money, mostly, though I added plenty of my own. Madison was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller than I'd heard it in years. Why would you take it away? I didn't do anything. You didn't, I agreed. This was never about you, sweetheart. This was about your father texting me at 7 in the morning to tell me I wasn't family. This was about your mother letting him send that message and not calling to stop it and not calling to apologize once it was sent. I have spent 6 years being useful to this family in secret because I did not want to be loved for money. Your father made it very clear last Thursday exactly what I was worth to him without it. But you're punishing me, Madison said. I'm the one who has to figure out $11,000. No, I said gently. I am not punishing you. You will have your tuition, Madison, every semester on time in full, for as long as it takes you to finish your degree. That has never been in question, and it never will be. But it is not going to come from a secret fund that lets your parents believe I don't exist. From this point forward, if I am paying for something in this family, my name is going to be on it, spoken out loud, at the dinner table, where everyone can hear it. I am done being invisible so that other people's pride stays comfortable. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, could picture her exactly, sitting cross-legged on her dorm bed the way she always did when she was thinking hard about something. Dad's furious, she said finally. He thinks you're trying to control everyone with money. Your father sent a 7-word text telling his father-in-law he wasn't welcome at his own granddaughter's graduation. I said, I would gently suggest he doesn't get to be the one lecturing anybody about control. Madison laughed, once, short and surprised, like the sound had escaped before she could stop it. It was the first time in this entire conversation that she'd sounded like herself. The following week unfolded the way I imagine a slow-motion collapse always does, not with one dramatic crash, but with a series of smaller structural failures, each one exposing how much weight I had genuinely been carrying without anyone ever noticing the load. Craig called me on Tuesday, his voice tight with a forced, apologetic warmth I recognized instantly as strategy rather than sincerity. Walter, listen, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding, he started. You told me I wasn't family, Craig, I said. There's no misunderstanding required. You were quite clear. I didn't mean it like that. Denise and I were stressed about the seating situation, and I fired off that text without thinking, and I'm sorry, I really am. But Walter, come on. You can't just pull the mortgage help without any warning. Denise didn't even know that money existed. We built our whole budget around money you didn't know I was giving you? I finished for him. Yes, I'm aware. That's rather the point, Craig. You built an entire life on a foundation you didn't know was there, and the moment you thought the foundation was gone for good, the moment you thought I was just a broke retired teacher, you decided I wasn't worth a seat at my own granddaughter's graduation. I'm not interested in funding a household that treats me like an obligation to be managed instead of a person to be respected. So that's it? You're just going to let us lose the house over one bad text? You have a job, Craig. Denise has a job. Grown adults are capable of affording their own mortgage without a father-in-law's silent subsidy. What you are not capable of, apparently, is basic decency toward the person who is subsidizing it. Those are two very different problems, and only one of them is mine to solve. He tried a few more angles after that guilt. then a strange attempt at flattery about what a generous man I'd always been, then finally something close to genuine anger, his voice rising as he accused me of using money as a weapon, of trying to buy control over his marriage. I let him finish. I did not raise my voice to match his. I used money as a foundation, Craig, for 6 years, quietly, without ever asking for credit or gratitude, I said. You're the one who decided that foundation could be discarded the moment it became inconvenient. I'm simply removing something that was never actually yours to begin with. I hung up the phone after that, and I did not answer when he called back 4 more times over the following hour. Denise came to see me in person the following Saturday, driving the 40 minutes from Wexford Court to my apartment alone. Without Craig, she stood in my doorway looking older than I remembered her, looking, dark circles under her eyes, and for a moment neither of us said anything at all. "Can I come in?" she finally asked. I stepped aside and led her into the small living room where I had raised her memory in every photograph on the wall, her at 6 years old on Carol's lap, her at 17 in a prom dress Carol had altered by hand 3 separate times until it fit exactly right, her at 29 standing beside me at Carol's funeral. The last time I remembered her holding my hand like she genuinely needed it. She sat on the edge of my couch, and for a long time she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was smaller than I expected. "I didn't know about the mortgage money," she said. "I didn't know about the scholarship. I didn't know about any of it, Dad. And I keep asking myself how that's possible, how you could have been carrying all of that for years and I never once noticed, never once asked how you were really doing, whether you needed anything." "You were never supposed to notice," I said, sitting across from her in Carol's old reading chair. "That was rather the point of doing it quietly." "But why?" Her eyes were wet now, and she wasn't bothering to hide it. "Why would you hide it from me? I'm your daughter." "Because I wanted you to love me for being your father," I said. "Not for being a bank account. Your mother and I built that habit a long time ago, keeping money quiet, and I suppose somewhere along the way it turned into something else. It turned into me disappearing a little more each year, becoming easier and easier to leave out of things, because nobody could see what I was actually holding up." Denise put her face in her hands, and her shoulders shook, and I let her cry without moving to comfort her right away, which felt strange and hard and necessary all at once. "Craig didn't mean it the way it sounded," she said finally, wiping her eyes. "He was stressed about the guest list, and his mother was pressuring him, and he just—" "Denise." I said her name gently but firmly, the way I used to when she was small and needed to hear something clearly. "I have made peace with a great many things about Craig over the years. I have watched him fail at a business, and let me quietly absorb the fallout. I have watched him make little jokes at holidays about my pension while living, unknowingly, off my money. None of that broke anything between us that couldn't be mended, because I chose, every time, to extend grace. But a man does not accidentally type the words immediate family only about his wife's own father. That sentence required a decision. And once he made that decision, I made mine." "So what happens now?" she asked. "Are you just done with us? With Madison?" "Absolutely not," I said. And I meant it with everything in me. I love my granddaughter more than anything left in this world, and that will never, ever change. I will be at her side for the rest of my life, as loudly and as visibly as she'll have me. But I am done being the silent scaffolding in a house that locks its doors on me the moment it's convenient. If this family wants my presence and my help going forward, it comes with my name attached, spoken at the table, not hidden in a spreadsheet. That is not negotiable, Denise. Not anymore." She nodded slowly, and something in her face shifted. Some old defensiveness finally giving way to something more honest. "I want that," she said quietly. "I want you at the table. I should have wanted that a long time ago." We talked for 2 more hours that afternoon, longer than we'd spoken honestly in years, and by the time she left, something had cracked open between us that felt less like an ending and more like the first real beginning we'd had since Carol died. It did not fix everything. Craig and I have not spoken since that phone call, though Denise tells me he's finally seeing a counselor about what she gently calls his pride issues, and I have decided, for Madison's sake and for Denise's, to leave a door open for that repair, someday, on my terms, at my pace. I still live in the same modest apartment off Preston Road. I have not moved into some grand house to prove a point, because that was never what any of this was about. But 3 weeks ago, I sat at Denise's dinner table on a Sunday evening, invited this time, expected this time, and when Madison mentioned her upcoming tuition payment, I said, plainly, in front of everyone, "I've got that, sweetheart. Grandpa's got that." And I watched my daughter's face soften with something that looked, for the first time in a long while, like genuine gratitude instead of quiet assumption. That evening, after I drove home, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of iced tea and watched the sun go down behind the rooftops of my neighborhood. And I thought about something I hadn't let myself think clearly in years, that being needed and being respected are not the same thing, and that a man can spend his whole life confusing one for the other if he isn't careful. I had spent decades believing that love meant becoming invisible in service of other people's comfort, that a good father absorbs every cost so no one else has to feel the weight of it. I understand now that real love requires being seen, being named, being thanked out loud, and that a family which cannot manage that basic decency does not deserve unlimited, silent sacrifice, no matter how much money sits quietly in the background making their lives easier. If you've ever been the one holding a family together without anyone noticing the weight in your hands, I hope you find the courage, someday, to set it down, even just for a moment, and see who's still standing there when you do. Share your story with me in the comments below, and if this reached you tonight, subscribe, because there are more of these journeys still to tell.